All right, welcome to another Conscious Endeavor. We are here to talk about consciousness, reality, space-time, physics, whatever the hell we want, really. The nature of reality, the nature of the self. So always diving into those things. Today, I think we're going to discuss a little bit about just the nature of language, how we think in general, how we approach, words conceptually, what they do for, let's say, the psyche, and how that influences the self and the processes of the self. Language is always kind of a reflection of how we're feeling. The way we talk to ourselves also is really big in psychology. We always talk about the self-narrative, right? And how we, basically apply language, because language at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, let's say, is a tool, right? It's a tool which can be used, right, to, initially, maybe evolutionarily speaking, to communicate between each other. But as language got more and more ingrained into the psyche and into our natural processes, right? Language in and of itself became this tool of self-growth, or this tool of, some people beat themselves up with language. They might say, I need to get down to this, and people might be really rough. And I was one of those people, definitely initially, growing up, that I was very like militant in my mind and like, go get that, and like stop being a, whatever, and I think cultivating a good way of your self-narrative and being compassionate in your self-narrative is something that's, something that you kind of have to unlearn, right? Part of that healing process, and to some degree.
It's a process. That's that programming, right? That language, and, language is a lot more subtle, I think, that for most people than, what we understand. Like anytime you say, I can't, it's not possible, you're already limiting something, and I know there's some things people are like, oh, you can't fly or whatever, but I'm talking about when like, yo, how can we do that? How can this happen? How can that happen? And once you start doing that, what ends up happening is you're limiting yourself. You're limiting the possibilities. And, the goal that I see when, we dip into spirituality, or at least the way I look at it is, we're limitless beings, and it's to let go of that conditioning. You may look at your process as something that was not good, but actually it worked out great for you because you're here. You're here right now.
It pushed me. And again, it being a tool, And
it keeps you, you having that, knowing that you can like tackle anything, right? When you're organized, when you take on things militantly, that means like you're a go-getter, you get it done. Some other people, what you could see is they might lack confidence, and they might lack it based off of the language that they use with themselves. Like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I can't. They're always defining themselves in a low vibration. Then what does that do? Low confidence, low magnetism. And then what are you drawing in? You're drawing even lower feelings.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's interesting too, because I feel like we're kind of bordering on this idea of labels. We a lot of times use labels for things, and these become a very easy way to categorize behavior. We've always, as we're growing up and as we begin to use language, we get into this, the idea of nouns, right? So this is a table, that's a chair, that's a, we name things. So then all of a sudden now, when we meet individuals, we meet ourselves, we think about ourselves, we again start to ascribe labels, these nouns to things, right? So whether you're like lazy, or I'm a loser, or I'm divine, or I'm amazing, what I mean? These are all just words and labels that we end up attaching to our self-identity. And then the interesting thing here is that, like, when we get into that, it's like now you're changing your physiochemistry. Like you're literally changing the brain and how you operate. You know what I mean? For example, if I'm going to sit here and be like, I'm a bioelectric cosmic being, you know what I mean? Like transmuting all time and space, all of a sudden, if I keep reiterating that to myself, there's going to be a certain emotional quality, and that emotional quality is indicative of physiological changes to the blood. You know what I mean?
Well, so you're basically saying that you can reprogram yourself by speaking to yourself differently, which would come to like those affirmation type
100%.
things. Well, so it's interesting. So like, are you saying like someone can turn themselves into, I mean, you didn't say this, but let me ask this question. Let's say someone's not a musician, but they keep telling themselves, I'm a amazing musician, I'm a magical musician, I'm a talented musician. If they keep saying that enough, would that lead to?
I'll have to say that music, being a musician, it's a craft. And in terms of having a craft, there needs to be discipline involved. For example, if I'm overweight, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm skinny, and it's going to work. You know what I mean? The thing is you need to build, you need to build the motivation in order to make that applicable in terms of just ascribing, as we're talking about, these labels, right? Labels help build motivation. So, for example, saying I will be an amazing musician, I will be an amazing musician. That should to some extent, right, give you the motivation and the kind of end goal process, right? To think that like I'm going to get there, right? Therefore, it might feed the discipline or also allow you to push through the negativity of discipline, because discipline sucks. You know what I mean? Like when you're pushing yourself at the gym, when you're pushing yourself to learn something, there's a lot of difficult moments. You know, but if you keep that end goal state, like I will get there, I will get there, I will get there, right? Kind of what you're saying with this distinction of can and can't. I can't do that, I can do this, right? You know, you need to do the work 100%. But at root, I'm saying the labels in the sense of saying I'm a loser, right? Because it's just such a blank concept. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? Where did you lose? Did you play checkers? Like, you know what I mean? These self-ascribed labels, or like, you know, to say that I'm a winner or I'm amazing, or you know what I mean? Whatever. But mantra, again, they connect to the unconscious part of the mind, because the unconscious just encodes what's repeated to it.
I've heard these amazing ones, and I communicate with a lot of people over my lifetime, and one of my favorite ones is like when a woman says like, "Never a bride, always a bridesmaid." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right. And then instantly the mood changes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like I've just lowered my vibration, and I've lowered my expectations, and I've come somehow, because that's like you're kind of cursing yourself there by like, even if that was the case, like you went to 3 weddings and you were a bridesmaid, for you to say that that's always the case means that that's the energy that you're putting out there. So chances are this conversation that you're about to have with me will not lead to what you're looking for. So just saying.
Right. Also, it's like they're defeating themselves. Yeah. So right away they're like, always a bridesmaid, and like literally the body language will change. You know, oh man, you know, and then all of a sudden now the body language you're projecting, the emotion that you're embodying, is not an emotion that's gonna be attractive to people. If you're out here like, woe is me, you know, no one's going to be like, I want that in my life.
Well, you know what I mean? Is like, there will be somebody that will take that on.
Right.
Whether they want it long term or not, it's another story. And that's why it's also important, like, you know, what vibe you're putting out there. Like, you'll never hear a guy go like, man, I'm always a groomsman, never a groom. I've never heard that thing. But, right. But you know what? And that's important because, like, you know, there's subtle labels too. There's subtle labels, you know, I'm just not that good. You know, someone's like, oh, you know, I'm too old.
Right.
What are you too old for? I've seen old people learn how to do like amazing yoga. I've seen, you know, painting, artistic work, pick up an instrument, even in the age of 70, 80, 90. Like, it's all possible. So, you know, these limiting beliefs, this labels, you know. And in society, you know, we are labeled from birth. Like, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's like a gender, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's this and that. What does that do? That gives it power. Yeah, I'm trying to break the cultural thing. As much as I love growing up with my culture, there's things like, I realized for me to really be a part of this oneness. To be timeless. Yeah, to be timeless, you got to be, you know, cultureless, like in that sense, right? Like, and people think culture means like, oh, look, he's not cultured, so therefore he's some lesser being. No, there's still etiquette. There's still laws that, you know, you should, you know, you're not here to harm anybody. You know, what are you eating? What are you drinking? You know, you're not like out here pushing things on people. It's, culture is one of those things that took a lot of my life.
I think it comes down to like an awareness of also like we have what we'd call like enculturation, right? Or you've assimilated to the culture that you're within. And it gives you, again, a certain point of view, a certain perspective. But the second that you take one point of view, now that you're limited in the holistic sense, right? You know what I mean? It's like, if I want to think about music theory, I would have to apply it to an instrument, right? Music theory applied to the bass versus applied to a piano. There's different mechanics within those instruments, but they're all applying music theory. So, I mean, the self, in a way, we can say, is like you're embodied in a different instrument. Right, like use your instrument, right? However, like, you know, whatever you're getting, right? You know, could kind of modulate. I mean, again, it's a random analogy here, but I think that culture, and the more that you learn about other cultures, also it kind of ends up allowing you to kind of negate the things that you saw in your culture, maybe that you didn't like or something like that. It's kind of like you become more culturally aware, you become more worldly, you become kind of the counter opposite to that. Right? There's something in your culture you don't like. You see another culture that does something differently. Now all of a sudden you can weigh these and you become more holistic the more and more you explore those things, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the difficult part about, you know, with these cultures, for my experience, was you're always looking at one as it's somehow better than the other.
Right.
Like, you know, people are like, oh shoot, man, Western civilization. Like, yeah, I don't know. Western civilization, I'm not talking about barbecues, 4th of July, you know, I don't drink beer, you know what I'm saying? Like, but then again, they do it in Germany and stuff, and they do it in other countries as well, in the East. But like certain things that are a tribute to culture, I'm just like, I don't vibe with it. It's not something, and you know, I tried though. I tried a lot of things that just to fit in. This is what everyone's doing. Let me do that. And then, you know, you get labeled an outcast.
Labeled.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, here we go.
Like, you know, the black sheep. Oh, this guy is different. He's not sitting here. I'm sitting like,
right.
the barbecue with us having a bunch of beer.
It's interesting too, because I've heard a couple of people talk about the fact of how we police each other.
Yeah.
You know, like if someone isn't assimilating to the culture, someone's not, you know, doing things the way we are doing things, right? We tend to police each other and honestly kind of keep each other in check in terms of the culture. Oh, like, why don't you do this? Or, oh, you do this differently, you know, and then we will literally bully each other, you know, to some extent to fit into, you know, the constructs and fit into the concept. And it's interesting because evolution has everything to do with change, and growth has everything to do with change. Like when a, you know, caterpillar grows into a butterfly, it's completely different. You know what I mean? Like, and now all of a sudden, imagine, you know, there's a bunch of caterpillars around and one's building a cocoon. They're like, what are you doing, man? You're so stupid. Why are you building that thing? Why, you know?
I've seen a lot of those, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And, you know, that's why it's always good to be kind to people, you know what I mean? Like, in my opinion, like, I've seen quite a few caterpillars come out of like things like and just transform into something so beautiful, so divine.
Yeah, we have to, you know, understand the journey, understand each individual's, you know, path in that sense.
And that's something more recently I've been dealing with is like, or not dealing with, understanding is this whole judgment thing, right? Like you size up somebody, like, you know, like you have a conversation with somebody, you make these assumptions, but at the end of it, everyone's trying to figure themselves out on, you know, on their own. And as you direct your energy to yourself, you can receive other people's energy better, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one quote that says, you know, the undisturbed pond reflects the best, right? Saying that, like, you know, if you look at water that's completely still, it reflects a perfect image of what's around it, right? But the second that the waters get jostled, right, now all of a sudden there's no reflection anymore, right? The reflection of the image. So that's in that sense of you saying, you know, when you settle yourself, when you're whole and natural with yourself, or let's say, I guess, settled, right, in yourself, you view things more clearly, right? Because you kind of have this, you know, blank slate where you're not imposing your personal biases, or, you know, you're not viewing it from the lens of, let's say, maybe your culture. You're just, you know, being flat out with it. I think a lot of times, and again, the analogy of like jostling the waters are related to emotion. Right? So if you have all this pent up emotion, or if you have pent up anger or sadness, and a lot of these things again get attached to language, right? The language we use. And there's like a cyclical loop here of like, I feel a certain way, so I talk to myself a certain way, right? And but there's multiple points of entry here. You can get into, you know, trying to settle the emotion, right, by just somatic physical practice, right? Or then you can change maybe the self-narrative, change the linguistic, do affirmations, and you can then start to affect the emotional world. So there's, you know, a couple points of entry, but it is a loop, you know, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, man, I don't know where to, you said so many interesting things. Like, first of all, the water part about the reflection, like, you know, we are water. You know, and when we're not balanced, that's what happens, right? Everything feels distorted. Everything feels like it's just, you know, like, I guess ripples, like, oh shoot, and not positive ripples. It feels like heavy ripples. And then, you know, Bruce Lee, be water, my friend, right? And
then, of course.
And then, you know, we were talking about when people start talking to themselves a certain way. Well, there's, you know, what causes that? You know, there's part of it, you know, we could say, in my opinion, is like ego, but then also like culture, TV, right? Like, for instance, I used to watch TV, and the idea of beauty that they would Like, I'm
Right.
gonna use an example. They make it look like someone is such a beautiful person. I believe everyone is beautiful,
Right.
but they're not everyone's cup of tea.
Right.
So like, everyone's like, "Yo, Julia Roberts is so gorgeous." Like, to be honest, I didn't feel that way. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it was kind of forced into my head because I'm
Right.
watching TV. This is who's beautiful. This is who's that.
Right.
So then there's a bunch of us that look, not like
Right.
these people, and it creates self-esteem issues.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like Jason Priestley, 90210. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in Detroit, bro. None of us look like Jason
Yeah,
Priestley.
right.
But that's what the media is making it glorifying,
Mm-hmm,
And then what does that do? It creates that effect, whether you believe it or not, like whether you see it or not. Like, think about it, like,
especially if it's at a young age.
yeah. And Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these
Screech.
yeah, Screech,
thinking
right?
about.
And look what happened. I don't mean to take it away. I'm not saying anything bad, but what happened to Screech? I mean, that's wild.
I don't know what happened to Screech. I'll be real.
Man, actually, I shouldn't even say it's wild because you see a lot of this in Hollywood and stuff like that, but like, or whatever they call the TV media. I think he just went down a darker path. I think, try to get popular, try to make up for.
Right.
He did a sex tape.
Wow.
Like, not that. All right, shoot. I'm not talking about anyone. Let me
But
stop.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I suppose maybe he internalized some of those labels. He was in the show like the dorky kid, and he probably wanted to go against that, which led to like behaviors so that he could feel as though he was not the label which he got ascribed. But yeah, I mean, especially at a young age too, like when we're watching television, if you're a television star, for example, even. We have these first initial imprintings. We have impressions that come onto us, and then our behavior now tries to either assimilate to that label or worked against that label. And it's interesting how it becomes this kind of back and forth. Like you're fighting against the things you think you are, right? Again, if you go to the Zen practice, they'd be like, "Well, just stop thinking."
Yeah.
Right? Just cease the thought process. And then those behaviors, these impulses, a lot of times, corrupt thinking leads to corrupt action. You know what I mean? So if all of a sudden you're now ascribing these labels and creating these things, and again, the Zen philosophy would say this idea of the self is illusory. The self is illusion. Because it's what you tell yourself that you are. And then all of a sudden, like, well, 2 years from now, maybe you won't be the same person. You tell yourself you're a different person. And 3 years ago, were you the same person? How did you tell yourself who you were at that time? So it's just constant flux. And again, when you talk about the now moment, it's like you're always changing and morphing, that like these labels are always modulating. Also, depending on who looks at you, one person might ascribe a label to you that like another person wouldn't ascribe to you.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? And all these different definitions of self come in, which are all just transitory. And, like.
Well, that's a good point, is like, sometimes we'll get away from people that don't look at us highly, and we'll get around people that look at us highly. It can be beneficial. I mean, it can be detrimental. You know what I'm saying? Like once you got a circle of people who are treating you like you're like some god or some king, and then truth is, like, you just left people that actually cared about you, that are giving you like important feedback, or trying to help you, trying to assist you. So, but I like the just tapping in with yourself, being in that Zen mode. How is it that you define yourself? I'm not saying define yourself right now, but what are the techniques that you use to do that?
So I think a really good way to really come into who you are to some extent is just like what I call intrinsic self definition. So coming into just the body, because the body is a storehouse of everything. How you're standing, how you're sitting, how you're posturing are all kind of factors to some extent of how you think about yourself. If you see someone with low self-esteem, they'll kind of like crouch in. Oh, shit. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So there are markers in your body that are your body. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score. And it's all about how, psychology basically ends up getting, ingrained into the body. And by doing body work, you can actually unconsciously release some of these things you were holding in your mind. So for me, when I come into who I am to some extent, or how I define myself, I would first come into the body. First come into the body and naturally realize what's going on with you. A lot of times too, I'll sit down to meditate and I'll just sit there and I'll be like, oh, my stomach feels weird. Like, you know, and I was totally not even aware of it, you know, and that happens, you know, various times where there's just sensations that are just like right there and they're constant. Your body's always sending these signals, but but you're talking on top, your self-narrative is sitting on top, your language is, you know, bolstering. If you turn off that, now you're going to become aware of the body, aware of the energy, aware of what we call somatic sensations, right? What's happening with you. And that a lot of times will give you insight into a lot. And moving through those energies and releasing those energies is a lot of work. And that's just step one. So you know what I mean?
In that step one, you're then facing yourself and like things that are being said to you that are not true, or is this what the body's saying to you that you're seeing as accurate?
So in this case, if we're talking about a meditative practice, it's really not self-narrative anymore. I would say, again, self-narrative will come back, it'll come in and out, because again, with meditation, you know, the mind is a tool as well. You know, the mind is designed to be a problem solver. That's why when you think about it, you know, people sit down sometimes and like, all I have in my head are all these problems that are going on. It's like, yeah, because that's what your brain's job is. Your brain's job is to figure out what's going on and to create solutions for things. So your brain is constantly going to think about problems and constantly bring you problems because that's what it does. You know what I mean? It's like, because it's trying to optimize. It's like, how did this work? And maybe we can do that better next time. And maybe if we do this, right? So your brain is always going to do that.
Okay.
It's just natural. It's part of evolution, what we call in psychology the negativity bias, right? Because you're constantly bringing up these negative things, but it's because our brain is trying to solve problems in the environment, right? So understanding that is natural, right? And a lot of times what happens too is like people get into meditation and then a problem will come to them in their mind and then they'll get taken off the path. And then also they'll think, well, there's something wrong with me because I can't stay focused and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is natural. Yeah. This is what happens. This is what your body does. And again, getting used to the pattern or what I'd say the oscillations of the mind, right? You'll get used to that. And when you get to those deep points where your mind is quiet, it might only be 30 seconds. It might be 10 minutes, you know what I mean? However long it is. Those are when you're really tuning in and you can move awareness around your body. You can settle your awareness. The difference between active and passive meditation, right? Whether you want to direct your energy and put it places or passive, I'm a big fan of in this case. If we're looking into introspection, I would say doing a passive meditation, right? Just seeing what is there. What do you feel? And just getting really deep into maybe a mantra in that case would be, what do I feel? What am I feeling right now? And if a thought starts coming, what am I feeling right now? Right?
Wow.
You know,
you put me in a meditative state right now just listening to that. Like,
yeah, hopefully everyone at home's doing the same.
Yeah, it's something that I want to focus more in on over the next, you know, this next chapter of my life. I have not had amazing meditative practices, but when I did sit with people going through meditations, it was pretty awesome. Like I was able to tap in and really receive clarity. I mean, but then, you know, the mind, so I don't know how to separate the mind / ego, primitive, whatever, like how to really separate that. But I realized that the ego is quite powerful.
Yeah.
And it can, like, you know, have you in so many loops and like so many, like, I don't even know how to say it. I don't want to say booby trapped, but literally it can just set you up in so many belief systems that you won't know what is true. So it's really important to get down to the core into a meditative state where you're quieting that ego and really listening into your heart. Because like I feel like there's true clarity there. You know, like the brain, the way I kind of perceive it right now is like it's there, like you said, like problem solver, but at the same time all the solutions I believe are within, and they're within, you know, you tapping into your soul. Like I almost feel like somehow turning off the brain, not like electronically or whatever, not electrically.
You can't.
Not EMF, not that way. Well, you can turn off the frontal lobe if you have too much alcohol. But you know, that was another episode, guys. Tune in. But
episode 4, something like that.
Yeah. The 13-minute mark. Not joking.
Get them viewing hours.
Just turning that off though, that is really vital. It is important, and I'm actually. That's my goal right now for the next, you know, this next chapter. I want to have a meditative practice where I'm turning it off and actively, you know, getting those answers because they're all within you. Like whenever people go to anybody for help or for assistance, essentially they help you look within you for the answer. If you're going to someone else for answers, then, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you're externalizing at that point. You know what I mean? And now all of a sudden, the locus of power, right, as we call it, has shifted, right, from internal to external. Now, all of a sudden, if you think somebody else has the answer that you're seeking, right, all of a sudden now you have lost agency, right? And now all of a sudden, like, so you should be the active agent in trying to work these things. And again, these intrinsic practices of just turning inward, right, coming into who you are, right? You know what I mean? It's really interesting for just getting in that clarity and getting, you know, better reflection, right? Stilling the waters and seeing the reflection of what reality is, what we've made, what you've made of your reality, you know? But one of the things I want to touch on too that you said was like, because I've heard you say before about this divisive nature, you know what I mean? Saying ego, right, versus other parts of the self, right? We're making naturally, you know, it becomes a distinction at that point, right? So maybe try to find a unity in that. And also just like maybe even, you know, we could meditate on the idea of unification, the unified self, because, you know, language is just a process and it's linear. It goes from left to right. You know what I mean? You know, I think, I'll let you try it.
I'll say, like, I kind of see it right now in my current awareness. I see things that I do based off of what I would call my ego. Like, I would be able to, like, I could see, like, this is what that guy wants that has a lack mentality. This
compensation.
This is what I want based off of me believing I don't have everything I need.
Yeah.
And then when you do that, whenever you function from that, at least in my opinion right now, like current awareness, I think it's really important for me to highlight that. You know, as we grow, we learn more. But anytime that I am functioning from a place that I don't already have something is a lack mentality.
Right.
So what I'm putting out there, to me, that lack mentality always comes from the primitive self, because the soul always knows that you have everything you need. You come into this world with everything you need. Right. All the knowledge in this world that you need is in your, it's there. It's accessible. These experiences that we have throughout life, these are more so, you know, just playing out things. These
part
are
of the game.
Part of the game. Part of the thing. It's like, you know, if you follow your heart, you know, and there's not saying that if you've, you know, are driven by your ego that there's not going to be something, you know, beautiful come out of it or good to come out of it, because they're all learning lessons. But at some point, ego chases certain things. Yeah. Like, it's certain things that it wants. The soul doesn't care about those things, because the soul knows those things are theirs. They're theirs. When we say we're abundant, when we say we're prosperous, if we really believe that, then we don't ever have to chase it. It comes to you. And right now, like, that's where it's at right now for me, is like, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to focus on. And I'm letting go of the ego, because the ego, like, man, the ego's restless. The ego,
right? It always get the next thing and then the next thing.
The ego's the same thing. Like, when you already have everything you believe you want, it's what wants you to get more, double up, triple up, you know. And that's where you see people when it comes to relationships. What happens? The ego gets involved, or they realize they might. I'm saying example, you know, because some people, they do what they do for whatever reasons, but when the ego gets involved, like, that's when you might see someone with multiple people. That's when you might see that whole, listen, I have to be with 2 women. I can't be with just one. And then you start having those discussions. I need to be with 3. I need to be with 4. It starts becoming that. You know what I'm saying? That's not what a player ends up doing, right? It's like, yo, you have something good. You have something that you like. You're obviously giving your energy to it, but you're not satisfied. And now you want more. And now you want more. Yeah. And it's not just with relationships. It's not just with dating or women. It's also with food. It's with drugs. Yeah. It's with all that. You know what I'm saying? And people don't see it's in a variety of ways. It's not just one way. Yeah. Right? Like, and that's why I'm like the ego or the monkey mind. It's so tricky, because it's not in just one layer. It's not just one thing you're facing. Right. You're facing it in all angles. Right. Like, even like a car, even like a house, even like a, you know, when is it enough? Yeah.
I mean, I think an interesting thing too, as you touched on, is like this sense of satisfaction. Like, you have these things, but you're not satisfied. Yeah. So it's curious to maybe dive into that and say, like, well, what is satisfaction? Where does satisfaction come from? And why are you not at peace? You know, I think that's really the root of it. It's like, well, why do I not have peace with what I have and who I am? You know, because things come and go. And I think the nature of life is that people come and go, things come and go. You know, you buy something new, and in 3 years, it's going to eventually be a non-functional at some point. So there's always this influx of material and outflux of material, and we need to, the ego is really concerned with that, about this accumulation and getting things and going and getting, right? But yeah, I think in order to find that kind of peacefulness in yourself and to be, calm with that, because one of the ways that, we'd say the ego would function is that there's a lot of overcompensation that happens. Is like if we don't feel that sense of satisfaction, if we don't have that settled sense of peace in ourselves, we're going to always be trying to create, happiness, which to me, happiness is practically, the way that the modern world looks at this emotion is very transitory. I got a new Game Boy, so I'm happy. You know what I mean? And I got a girlfriend right now, so I'm happy, and these attachments, again, to the Zen kind of way of looking at it, the attachments are like a source of suffering, because you become attached to these things, and we attach those things to our identity, right? And now all of a sudden, this identity is what the ego creates. It's this self-created structure, and this is my ego, and I have a Game Boy, and I have a girlfriend, and I have a house, and I have a nice car, and I have a job, and I have all this stuff, right? And now when you lose one of those things, you've lost a piece of this thing that you created, and it's like losing an arm. Yeah. You know what I mean? And this is why also people fight to the death when their ego gets challenged, because now you're challenging this self-created idea that I have. And if this isn't real, right, I don't know what real is. And then that's when people have these existential crises, right? When their world breaks down, or their mind breaks down, or they lose parts of things, right? And then now all of a sudden it's like, yo, you just lost your Game Boy, broke. Like, why are you freaking out, right? And it's like, no, it was a part of my identity, right? Or whatever.
Turbulence, right? Life becomes very turbulent then, and that's why it's important to be centered. And that's what I'm saying. I feel the people that are, I actually could be anybody, but being satisfied or feeling, I don't want to say contentment because it feels like a container, but just having gratitude. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
Whether someone has that job, whether someone doesn't have that job, whether someone has that car or not, they're still dope people. I've met people, I've had amazing memories in what we might call horrible situations when it comes to poverty, and I've had amazing memories when it comes to hanging out with what might be considered somewhat wealthy, and there's no difference in the feeling. It's a feeling. It's a vibration. It's not this material thing. I can sit, I'm moving and I'm thinking about emptying out my house. I'm like, oh, I'll keep this and that. I'm like, honestly, I don't need any of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying because I have it like that. I'm saying because to be honest, what do you need when you're traveling? You just need some clothes and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, interesting too, because now what you're bringing in is that idea of non-attachment, right? It's like I have these things and it's like, well, I'll sell that, or maybe I'll get rid of that, but just not being attached to those, because now you don't have the suffering of you're not losing an arm, because it's an illusion, right? This whole idea, it's like things will come and things will go. So it's like, I'm going to let go of these and new things will come. You know what I mean? And I think being okay in that is a source of having that and maintaining that state of mind. There's one quote in the Bhagavad Gita, right, which I'm going to butcher, but essentially it says that a person who maintains themselves or maintains their mind through kind of ups and downs, through and gets rid of aversion and compulsion, right, and who can be centered through all of those push and pull things, right, attains enlightenment, or at least moves towards enlightenment. So always trying to echo in those sorts of things.
Yeah, that leads to clarity, right? That is clarity. Enlightenment, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not like I'm enlightened.
It's a huge concept.
But, I'll say, but it's to be clear, to know that everything that's happening in this world is happening for you, not to you, and then it's like it's so difficult when you turn on the news or just TV, or you talk to other people. You can turn off everything, but when you're communicating with people that are still, attached to these things, they bring those vibrations on. Did you know what happened over here? What happened over there? Oh, there's a shooting, there was an earthquake, there was a this, there was a that. And I'm like, yo, man, that sucks, man. I'll send prayer, send positive vibrations, but what is one to do with that information? What is one to really do with it? So it's almost like, I'm not saying you shouldn't care about your fellow man.
You can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Things that have already occurred, and also natural disasters, things like that nature, right? It's like that weighs on the self to some degree, but.
Yeah, and then It's orchestrated too, which is the funny part, but let me not get into that. Back to when people go to other people for help, with trying to figure out the answer. What ends up happening in that is you become susceptible to labels from other people. And that is dangerous. Like, to me, it's like, like you go to somebody, you're looking at them like as some high guru. If they don't necessarily look at you like that, and they look at you as a client, a business, someone I'm here to assist, it really changes it can change the dynamics and the output. Yeah. And that's why it's important for you to know who you are yourself. And I know that I might have said this before, but confidence is the first thing, like, I feel like we should teach children. Just like, don't stop them from anything. Let them do what they want. Let them do what they learn, as long as they're not hurting themselves, And even then, if they hurt themselves a little bit, let them do it, But it's important to have that before we put them in any schools, before there's any structure, before we start, showing them TV and some sort of hierarchies.
Yeah.
Because hierarchy is another thing, what I mean? Like, how interesting is that? I don't know if you've ever sat in a corporate environment and you're sitting with a bunch of managers, and then there's a director. Ooh, it's a director.
Right. Don't piss him off.
Yeah, and then hey, the CIO, the CEO is visiting. What I'm saying? Everyone dressed up. Do this. Like, what?
It's all a show. I mean, it's kind of like ritual based in a way, in my opinion. But yeah, and it's also interesting how people who are these higher ups will treat people who are subordinate to them. You know what I mean? And it becomes this kind of dynamic. It's like, if we were on the street, like, you wouldn't talk to that person like that, like, you know what I mean? Because allegedly outside you're all equals, but within the structure, within the hierarchy, all of a sudden there's this like imposition of like, I'm better than you, I have power over you, I have this and this and this. And again, those are kind of created illusory structures to some extent, because like, you might get fired tomorrow, like CEO might get replaced tomorrow.
Dude, there's I mean, I'll tell you what, that turnover is a little small, like shorter.
Right.
Like, you gotta do, the wild thing is, like, the higher up you go in that corporate ladder, the more horrible things you can get away with. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's no human resources. They're not there to like, we think they're there for, like, oh shoot, to really protect you, right? They're just there, like, it's like, all right, we'll try to make you happy somehow, some way, with some conversation, but there's really nothing they can do to really.
Yeah. I mean, again, just echoing here the use of language to have something called human resources. It's just like okay,
wow,
right?
wow.
Yeah, okay.
You need it in the corporate world, because we need someone who's human to,
right. Or I'm thinking even just like utilization of these people and how to like push them along the kind of hamster wheel and get them placed in the right place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a job in and of itself.
Develop a program to make them happy. You know what? We're gonna have a corporate picnic one day a year. You guys are all invited. You know what? There's also, I just want to bring this up. I'm not like calling any labels, but I realized at some point, no matter what part you are on that corporate ladder, like, it's not like this prestigious thing that people make it seem. Or actually, it might be exactly what the prestigious thing is, because prestige, what is that? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it's something that people label and give value to. It's kind of like, almost like, hey, there's a Queen of England, or it was, whatever, I don't know, like,
Right.
I mean, there was, and like, people are like, oh, you've been knighted. So this woman touching you on your shoulder with a sword is now labeled you now you're a sir, so you've been labeled. What does that really mean? But it's a label that people somewhere somehow like look upon it with like respect. Like, did you know Elton John was knighted?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's a label, you know what I mean? But we're so unconsciously used to labeling things. Again, our language works in just creating nouns, and like, that guy's a servant, that guy's a knight, and
he's
that
a patriot.
this. Yeah, he's a patriot. You know what I mean? And we are so unconsciously just, it's the norm to label things and to label people. And also, I mean, for me, labels are intellectually lazy because it's a shortcut. Because in order to say, like, for example, if we, in the terms of our evolution, we found certain animals, like, maybe some wolves, a pack of wolves that were cool, that we're domesticating, like, they're safe, right? It's a concept, right? Versus another wild animal, right? These are things, and it allows us to understand and to some degree predict our environment and predict behavior. These wolves are safe, right? Those tigers are wild. Right now we have words, but they're allowing us to operate. So if we go around another animal that we were told is safe versus another animal we're told is wild, it allows us to curtail our behavior to increase our chances of survival, right? But now that became so normalized that now we ascribe these tools or these labels to individuals and to ourselves, right? To now say, well, that guy is lazy and that person's hardworking and this person's, whatever. And now all of a sudden, because to be honest, every individual is multidimensional, right? They might be lazy in one moment that you observe them, but doesn't mean their entire existence. You know what I mean? Or maybe that one guy who is hardworking, he just, in that exact moment, he was in a rush and he had to do something, whatever. And now we're going to think that they're like that. We assume this uniformity. But everyone is going through these ups, downs, good times, bad times, over years, over whatever,
Yeah. So I don't know, like, if everyone does go through the bad times, right? Like, I think when you're centered in my opinion, right? Obviously I go through but I'm saying there are people that I've, came into communication with that seems like them being centered or understanding who they are is a constant. And with that, whatever comes their way, yes, there's like agitation that happens, but it's not like as dynamic, like as, shit, my life's over. Oh my gosh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fudge is going on? I can't believe this. I can't believe that. I don't know. How did this happen? It doesn't surprise people anymore because it just becomes like, life is a magical thing. Things happen. You know what I'm saying? And that's if something, in the sense of like this karma scale, if something horrible happens to you, it might be because something horrible you might have done or something horrible that, you avoided by this thing. Maybe it was a lesser punishment.
Right.
Like some people are like, man, I got my car was destroyed, but I'm like, were you hurt? No. All right, cool. But they'll look at it like, oh my gosh, my car was destroyed. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Like, your life was just saved. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, but it's just about viewing things a certain way. So, when we say like, these waves come like, up and down, but you're the current. How is your currency flowing? If you're aligned, if you're in alignment, if you're tapping in with yourself, chances are things are gonna be really good.
Yeah, I mean, something I can mention here too is that like we talk about mental framing in psychology and how you frame the situation. As we talk about spiritually speaking, like focusing on gratitude, it's just changing your framing. How do you frame this situation? Did I lose my car or did I preserve my life?
Yeah.
Right. What I mean? It's how you frame the situation and what angle and what perspective you tend to take. And perspective taking, can become habitual. So a lot of times too, it takes really, this is also why like mantras and affirmations are repeated over and over and over again, because it takes that, again, these things get ingrained in the body, right? They get ingrained in the mind. The mind is literally neural networks. So they literally connect together and it takes energy. And the interesting thing is the already existing neural network is essentially the path of least resistance. It's the fastest way for electricity to flow from A to B in the brain. So that habit is the fastest way that your brain knows how to do it. It's the easiest way. The harder thing to do would be now to change that, reroute that behavior, and now find a new, because think about it like physiologically here, like you're finding a new pathway in the brain. If you want to encode a new habit, it's going to take a lot of biological energy, to make that happen. And also your brain is going to keep saying, well, hey, there's a shortcut. Like, why aren't you taking the shortcut? We built this road. We built this neural network. We built this behavior pattern so that we could get there real fast. Right. But now, maybe knowing that may be detrimental to yourself or that perspective or that mental frame that you're holding, right, is, has other repercussions. Right. We need to put that energy and work in to change the mind.
So it creates this neural network, which is like this you can actually like physiological like current. It's going back and forth.
100%.
So to break that habit, what are techniques? Are there treatments or is it more like practicing?
It just comes down to repetition.
Repetition.
Again, because what we talk about Hebbian learning, which is, I think, I forgot the guy's first name, like Charles Hebb or something like that. So he's just the guy who figured this out. But Hebbian learning basically says that what fires together wires together, so that when certain habits form, these neural networks, they get stronger. And if we really want to break it down, there's a protein called protein kinase zeta inside the neuron, and it'll increase in amounts when basically the more and more information it stores, the more it gets used. This amount of protein increases, right? So literally it's biological. how these neural networks, how this information is made and encoded. The thing is again, it becomes the path of least resistance. So your brain is going to be like, hey, we've always done it this way. It's easy to do it this way. It's easy to rationalize. And again, thinking about labels, thinking about the way that we think in general, they get reinforced. So if you want to, again, it takes conscious choice to choose the alternative and decide what the alternative should be. But then once you do that, you just have to hit repetition. You just have to hit repetition. It's going to be a constant battle back and forth of denying the shortcut, denying the negative self-talk, negative self-narratives, negative labels, literally just depriving them of energy. Think about, they have that Native American analogy where there's two wolves inside you, right? Whichever one you feed will get stronger, right? So you can kind of think about it like that, and in terms of this, it's like, if you want to strengthen the other one, dive into mantras, dive into somatic practices, engage the habit and just do it. You know what I mean? Like, don't overthink it either. You know what I mean? Just engage it. And the more it's going to suck the first couple times. It's going to be very difficult the first couple times because the body is not used to it. But in this essence, the body does what the mind, whatever signal the mind gives, right? Or the soul gives, the soul to the mind, to the body, however we want to create these distinctions, because the body keeps score, as we know, right? The mind has these networks, right, which create these habits, the path of least resistance, these patterns in our personality, right? And then there's another part of ourselves, whatever that might be. Science maybe not even have a term for it at this point, because it comes now into religiosity of the soul and conscious awareness and all these things. And consciousness is debated among people in the scientific community, what it is, where it comes from. We don't know where it comes from or how it arises. There's a theory of emergence, which talks about how consciousness just emerges out of the brain, allegedly, right? But there's that other part of yourself which now says, well, what is my life path and where am I going with these things? And these evaluative processes, right? That it says like, well, I don't feel right with this and I need to go in this direction and something's telling me, you know what I mean? These intuitive callings, which now allow us to rewire the brain, rewire the mind, get back, into allowing the body to make these transitions and these shifts and things like that.
Are there workshops that you have coming up about for these? Yeah,
100%. So Self-Perpetual, if you guys look me up on Instagram or selfperpetual.com, I give a 12 workshop series, that goes through all of this stuff. Goes through the body, the biorhythms, self-narrative. We talk about, I go into yogic practice, bioenergy, bioelectric energy, geoenergy, all these different things that eventually just break down the phenomenon itself and get you into habit formation, get you into all these sorts of cool stuff. So that's always available. Links are always in the description for everybody at home.
Dude, that's really I'd say good, because like it's not like it's a one-stop shop to really heal yourself, because ultimately it's not what I've learned in spiritual practice. You ultimately heal yourself,
right?
And what you're doing here with these workshops is helping people with the tools necessary to start that process. It's not about going and getting a medication or something. It sounds like, hey, use your brain, use your mind, tap in with the soul, tap in with your body, and like, that's really dope, man. Self-perpetual, guys, like, and then I would say with labels, just the last thing about that is, it's almost to a point where like labels are so limiting. Like even like when we I know this, it's better to have positive labels than to have like negative labels, but also like, is there a point of like no labels, where it's just, hey, you are just,
Yeah, I mean, if we think about like, I always like to reference like Taoism, because like Taoism is like this idea that everything is the Tao, but the second you talk about the Tao, you're wrong, because it can't be spoken.
Yeah,
it's not,
I've heard that too. Like, like they're like, when I've talked about decisions I've made from my ego, people, they're like, but it was divine though. Like, I'm like, I get it in that sense. Yeah, it does make sense. But I also think, it's that higher self, lower self, or higher self, primal self, right? Higher self.
It's like everything kind of avoids definition in a way too, is what I just was kind of zoned out there for a second. But just thinking about it in the sense that like, no matter how you try to define something, the second that you try to define it, it like limits it. It limits it. Yeah. It limits it, right? There's the analogy of like a bunch of blind people, and they're all touching an elephant, and one of them says, well, and he's holding the tail, and he's like, well, it's bushy and it's like narrow, and then the other one's holding the ear, and he's like, it's flat and it's flexible. The other one's on the leg, and it's like, well, it's enormous and it's thunderous, and they're all looking at the same thing. However, they're all, again, have different perspectives in this case, right? They all have different perspectives on what it is, and now all of a sudden they're trying to all define the same exact thing, but they're, coming at it from a different angle. They're starting at a different point. You know what I mean? So again, like, there's kind of this unspoken nature, and again, tapping into the self and tapping into this bodily awareness. As we were talking about that step 1 before, right? Hitting into that, then you'll get into realizing patterns in yourself, being able to be more aware of your energetic self, the subtle energy, which they talk about in a lot of like other practices. But it goes deep. The well goes deep. My friend.
I mean, like, I can keep going because I'm like, hey, man, each of these blind people have different sensories too. When they like with their touch, the way they're absorbing information is not going to be the same. Whether they're all blind does not mean like everyone's equal in that sense. Because like, who knows? One of them might be like Daredevil. You know what I'm saying? He might know what that is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too because it's like in the way that we were talking about culture. Right? You know what I mean? Like each of us are talking about life and what life is and what life is like. Yeah. But we all have a different culture and nationality and upbringing and parents. Yeah. Different imprintings and impressions and different media. Yeah. Like, right?
You could hear like someone be like, I'll just use a gender example. Women be like, I hate the way society's set up. It's all pro to men, and the men will be like, it's all about women, this and that. It's just like different views, different perspectives. Yeah. What we're doing here is just trying to bring our perspective in, what we're experiencing, and even within that, they're unique to both of us. So, yeah, I feel gratitude to be able to share this and to speak, here and let out this information that we've accumulated over our journey so far. Yeah, there's still a lot more to come though, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot more to find out. It never stops, and that's something I really want to just circle back to. The journey of self lasts forever. It's not like this like one day thing, like you're at this end point. You're still figuring out things as you go. New things are being discovered or old things are being rediscovered. I don't know, maybe that'll be one of our episodes where we talk about the old is new and new is old. Yeah, I mean, I know that's
I like that. Yeah. So maybe drop in the comments about what your experience has been with maybe your self growth and your shifts in personality. Let us know what you guys think. Maybe drop some new episode ideas out there as well.
And let go of some of those labels. Let us know which ones you're releasing, so we can all just send some energy. So we send it out and we don't face it anymore.
Most definitely. So yeah, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. We'll see you guys next week on The Conscious Endeavor.
Thank you.